Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Med Device Cyber Podcast. Today we have a special guest. We have Dr. Dylan Attard. He is the founder of MedTech World. I think MedTech World's been going on for a couple years now, and it's growing quite a bit. And Blue Goat Cyber's attended a few of the MedTech World events, and we have one coming up as well. And I'm joined here by our guest, Trevor Slattery, our co-host. Sorry, not our guest, but our co-host, Trevor Slattery. Trevor, how's it going? I think you're coming to us from Qatar today. Is that right? You're still in Doha?
Yep. Yeah, still in Doha. And I've heard a lot of back and forth while being here about if it's Qatar or Qatar. And I don't think anybody knows the answer.
I think it's Qatar. That's how they say it on the airway and the airline.
Yeah, it's 110 degrees outside. So happy to be inside on this podcast.
Not quite as hot as it is in Phoenix. I think it'll be about 110 today as well. I'm coming to you from Phoenix. And where are you today, Dylan?
I'm at home base in Malta.
In Malta, okay, cool. So we have like kind of the whole globe covered.
Summer is just starting here, actually. Up until yesterday, there was a very nice breeze, but today it's full on heat. So I'm guessing June is gonna be hot.
Cool. Well, I know we'll be going to Malta later this year. So excited! I've never been to Malta before, so I'm looking forward to it.
I'm sure you're gonna enjoy it.
Yeah, we just got back from Monaco, so I'm a little bit jet lagged, but it's all good.
We're very similar, I guess, Malta to Monaco, except there's no Formula One racing here. Other than the quality of life, streets, history, culture, I guess we're a little bit similar to Monaco.
Awesome. Well, as we get started here, you wanted to give us a little bit about your backstory. I know you were a practicing physician for a while, and then what inspired you to leave that and start MedTech World?
Yep. So I graduated as a medical doctor around 10, 11 years ago out of Malta's main university. I was doing surgery, always loved working as a physician, as a medical doctor. It always felt like kind of the natural path from primary school to secondary, always wanting to be right in the middle of some kind of action. And healthcare, especially surgery, seemed to be the right fit. But then eventually it always felt like, especially tending to one patient at a time, I've always felt restricted working in hospital, just working in one hospital, tending to one patient at a time. Always wanted to be able to not just purely travel, but work on the international scale, on a global scale. Always loved defense, was quite curious about venture funding back then, and sort of got lucky in terms of the opportunity that it got handed to me to start MedTech World, which back then, 5-6 years ago, it was meant to be simply an annual conference promoting Malta as a potential hub for medtech and health tech companies to set up on the island. And I mean, I took a risk, I guess. I still keep saying it's a break from surgery, but I guess 5-6 years in, it's a permanent stop.
Awesome. It's interesting. We have in Blue Goat Cyber, we have a former cardiac surgeon. He heads up our sales team, Rick Turner. And we have a former nurse, Melissa. She's my wife, actually. And they both kind of said the same thing. Like Melissa, it's one patient at a time. And with Rick, one surgery at a time. But now they feel like we're helping more patients by helping bring these devices to market securely.
Yep, I mean, I do miss surgery, especially now. Most of my friends and people I did medical school with have started to be promoted to resident specialists, consultants. So towards the end of the spectrum where it gets more fun, because then you have a team working for you as opposed to doing most of the hard work at hospital alone. So I do miss it. And I guess it's always a case of the grass being greener on the other side. I mean, it wasn't easy for me to take this decision, especially being a first generation medical doctor within my family. So you could imagine me going to my parents who had devoted most of their life towards funding me as much as they can for me to go to medical school, private lessons, get the best grades that I could. And then eventually, I'm gonna start doing MedTech World. And I still remember the look on their faces. It was like, you're going to become an event organizer. How does that make sense? And I'm like, no, Ma, there's a much bigger picture in it. And it's only now that she started to kind of get the whole point of what I've done. She was with us, and I believe you met her as well in Dubai last February. And that's the first time where she kind of understood the whole reality of what I'm up to and the scale of it all. But it was never an easy choice.
Yeah, I remember, I believe I met your mom in Dubai. Yeah.
Yep. Yes.
Well, you've been in the industry quite a while. Where do you see things going in terms of overall like trends and cybersecurity?
I think most of the innovations we're currently enjoying at the moment, we have the pandemic to thank for, I guess. Because the pandemic, I feel that it made people realize how important investing into our healthcare ecosystems is across the board. It made governments realize that they don't have any other choice but to invest in. And we've started seeing more public and private investments into the whole healthcare ecosystem. So at least there's some bright lining from that. In terms of where the industry might head to in the next couple of months of years, I guess. I mean, I had a recent webinar some days ago, and we spoke about a lot on robotics in surgery, which is something I'm obviously quite passionate about because I've done surgery myself, and I think that's a trend, not just purely robotics in surgery, but robotics across the whole board, as most of the newer and most innovative companies and solutions are trying to alleviate stress from our healthcare workforce and healthcare ecosystem as much as they can, because most of the healthcare ecosystems across the world and countries and governments are being faced with a lot of healthcare practitioners choosing alternative paths, very much like myself, your wife, your co-founder, and this is because of the increase in demand, increase in populations, increase in number of diagnoses being made much before than they used to. So there's much more demand and pressure on the healthcare ecosystems, and this putting more pressure and demand on the healthcare ecosystems in general, I guess.
And I know in Dubai, like a big topic there was the expansion of MedTech to the Middle East and also Africa. Do you think that's like the next big area, like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Africa for MedTech? Or do you think it's going to expand more in, Asia? Just curious what your thoughts are.
I think most of the regions you've mentioned are quite unexploited in terms of the opportunities that lie there. And I think more companies, especially after they've dominated some of the Western markets, Europe, and maybe they've been faced by a lot of red flags or bureaucratic steps in most of these areas, are now looking to other areas in which they're much more open to investment, and there's much more opportunities. I am personally quite a huge fan of the Middle East in terms of the way they do business, the way they're very open to not just purely networking, but collaborating with the rest of the world. Dubai showed it first many years ago. Most of the time they were met with a lot of criticism that they won't achieve what they're doing. Now there are other countries in the region trying to follow in Dubai's and UAE steps. Saudi Arabia, Trevor is in Qatar. They're very much keen on obviously trying to match their fellow countries' successes. So me personally, I'm quite a fan of the Middle East and their potential to continue expanding MedTech and putting more money into MedTech, which essentially will leave a very good ripple effect on the rest of the international markets, be it in Europe, be it in the West. In terms of Asia, we've done an event there in Singapore last year. It was the first time I had been in Asia, in all fairness, and it was the first time that I've started to network, speak, and get to know the Asian ecosystem. One of the misconceptions that I felt, especially from fellow friends and colleagues of mine from this side of the world, Europe and the West, is that they think that Asia is big enough and sustainable on its own. And when I started speaking to companies in Asia, not just in Singapore, Southwest, Southeast Asia, and the rest, I was always getting the feeling that they very much feel that they're constrained within Asia, and one of their biggest challenges is on how to move away from Asia. Sometimes they're using Singapore as a stepping stone because once they set foot in Singapore, then from there they can eventually move to Europe, move to the US, and so on. I felt that that's quite a misconception, that we always thought that Asia were very much by themselves, sustainable. They don't need the rest of the industry. When in fact, I think it's the other way around.
And I notice your next Asian event is in Hong Kong. Is that right?
Yep, we're still, when it comes to MedTech World, we haven't really found a home yet in Asia, and that's something that we're looking to explore. We've done, as you've said, an event in Singapore last year. We've enjoyed it. It was in September, one-day event, and we're looking to do it again this year, in September again. But until then, we're going to be exploring Hong Kong, which I think is quite an interesting hub. Obviously, I mean, there is a lot of money there. And there's a lot of will for innovation across different industries, including MedTech. So we're quite excited to explore it. We're going to be partnering up with one of the major investment conferences in the region, Novax. It's purely an investors conference, and there's some of the biggest funds from Sequoia Capital to the family offices in Asia joining. But it's not purely focused on healthcare, which sometimes I even find more exciting, because I do think that the healthcare industry can enjoy a lot of the cross-pollination between different industries. We've seen it with telemedicine. Up until some years ago, we used to see a lot of articles being written. You can order groceries online, but you can't get a prescription, or you can check your bank account, but not your electronic healthcare records. We got that more or less from trying to cross-pollinate between different industries. So we're looking forward to that. And in parallel with both Hong Kong and Shanghai, we're trying to explore South Korea, and as well as China. So hopefully we'll be able to nail down some roadshow events there this year as well, before obviously our main MedTech Malta conference in November.
All right. You're all over the globe. Pretty busy.
I mean, we try to keep to our name, I guess, MedTech World.
Pretty soon it'll be MedTech Universe.
Yeah, awesome. I guess Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk are trying to make it easier for us, I guess. So we'll see how they keep track.
There you go. Once we colonize the moon, we can expand there.
Try to do the first MedTech convention on Mars.
I've always wanted to be the first at something, so we'll see.
And I know, like, cybersecurity, that's what we do. We do MedTech cybersecurity. Obviously, it seems like nobody talks about cybersecurity and MedTech until it's too late and it's a crisis, and it delays their submission because it cannot get approved by the regulatory authority. Do you feel, Dylan, that cybersecurity is becoming more of a topic of interest, or people are still kind of lacking that awareness?
When I first started MedTech World, I was always trying to come up with some original content to try not obviously make the whole conference ecosystem a copy and paste. One of the panels that I had tried to create, I think it was in my second year, a panel on cybersecurity. And I tried to literally scavenge LinkedIn, trying to find cybersecurity companies who would be keen on participating, even if they're looking to simply join and speak on stage. And I could barely find any. And I remember back then speaking to the rest of the team, I'm like, cybersecurity, how come we're finding it difficult? It's so much needed. And over the past years, way before I started MedTech World, I was always obviously quite keen on technology. Sometimes you're even seeing films of this government being hacked, this hospital being hacked. I had done one of my electives during medical school was in Germany, in Dusseldorf. And I remember some months after I had done that elective, seeing on the news that the same hospital I had been to was hacked and was literally not being able to function for a good amount of time. And I remember, like, it's because they didn't have their cybersecurity on point.
For like a whole month, they were unable to function, you said?
No, for a couple of hours. Actually, it lasted nearly 1 to 2 days. It was a private hospital, and I remember they had shifted most of their emergency staff to a fellow other hospital, but they were kept quite at a standstill and at the beggars of whoever was manipulating this and their technologists. My point is, I think, especially over the past couple of 1 to 2 years, maybe 3, anyways, the industry has started to realize more the importance of cybersecurity, and I think we have our investors to thank for. I think especially when it comes to obviously the MedTech industry and the MedTech investment scene is not where we want it to be. So companies are trying to make sure that they have everything in check, and investors are trying obviously to invest in as low risk companies as possible. And cybersecurity is often being flagged as one of the most things that they should focus on, especially with the increasing in technologies, increasing in incidences that are happening around the world and so on. The thing, if I may, that might work against these that might work against this is that hopefully, I guess, when some of these hacks and cybersecurity incidents that are happening are being notified to the public, because I do fear that sometimes there are some, as in some of the hospitals or healthcare ecosystems, let's not blame anyone, will try to hide some of their inefficiencies purely for the sake of no bad promotion.
I agree with that. I think there's been quite a few incidents, but they were never really disclosed of.
Exactly, because obviously everyone will try to keep it as quiet as they can. There's money involved and security. They will try to clean away any of their messes. And I mean, it's human nature. Sometimes you're always, especially when you don't have as many resources, as many money that you want, you're trying to prioritize what you're going to invest in. Cybersecurity, if you're trying to stay afloat, if you're trying to make it until your next round, cybersecurity is never going to be on the top of the list, which is hopefully, especially through conferences, not just like MedTech World, but conversations, even conversations like these, we get our medtech and health tech startups to realize that they need to start preparing and investing in cybersecurity from day one. Because if you're going to do it on day 30, day 300, it might even cost you more, not just in terms of resources, in terms of money, but even in terms of time. And that's going to backfire eventually if you're lucky not to be faced with an incident that you can't actually survive.
What do you think, Trevor, as far as industry's progression here?
I think it's good that the regulators are trying to enforce that a little bit more, but it is ultimately the shared responsibility. Regulators need to be on top of the latest industry trends and trying to enforce that as far as what innovators are doing. Manufacturers, innovators need to be responsible for adhering to the trends, putting out safe devices, but hospitals often are going to be equally as responsible for ensuring that they have safe devices in their network. And what we're often seeing is that hospitals will have more strict purchasing requirements than even the FDA regulations as far as what they want to see on device certification. So it goes a lot deeper than just that initial step. There's cybersecurity to get through your first round through the FDA so that you can start selling your product. There's more cybersecurity to actually sell the product. And there are a lot of layers that I feel like many different innovators just don't really think of until it's too late. It comes down, the push comes to shove, and then they're getting all their documents ready for their submission. They don't have anything for cybersecurity. They go to Mayo Clinic, they go to Johns Hopkins, they're trying to sell their product, and they kick them back and say, we need all this cybersecurity documentation to prove that you're safe in our network. Since, it's like you said, there's a lot of money involved. There are a lot of problems. If these hospitals get compromised, they're going to be liable to a lot of, fees. Their patients could possibly get harmed, may even die. They could be open to lawsuits because of it. There was recently a ransomware hack in the UK against a blood center for cancer treatments, where they were out of commission for about 5 weeks and they could deliver no treatments. And many of their patients weren't able to get on the NHS wait list to get treatments elsewhere. So that was a recent case where they're saying that they were able to directly pin ransomware on murder in a hospital to multiple patients. So, of course, having that
You said
liability.
they pinned it to murder, so they were going to charge the people, if they caught them, that did the ransomware with murder, actually?
They don't know who did the ransomware, but they're saying that they did effectively murder those patients. But, the hospital's at liability as well for not having their security covered up and allowing that incident to happen. So the innovators, if a medtech innovator is putting out a device, of course, financial, legal repercussions for it, and even the reputational repercussions of knowing you have a device out there that is leading to these problems is massive. So I think it's very important, like you said, to have on day one, not on day 200.
Yep. What's your feedback? I mean, you're obviously the ones speaking to the medtech companies and hospitals there. Has there been a positive shift over the last couple of months, years, in terms of them being more proactive and wanting to invest more into cybersecurity, or are you still finding it a very difficult job to convince them to invest in cybersecurity?
It's a slow shift, but it's slowly getting there. I think it's too slow of a shift. We're seeing a few companies here and there get a little bit more savvy about it, come to us in the idea phase, which is what we want to see, but still far too many are pushing it to the last minute. They have 2 weeks until their submission and they realize they didn't cover cybersecurity, or they'll try to cobble something together at the last minute and submit. They get rejected and then they panic. They're running out of investor money. They're running out of time. They have to make all these promises, ask for more money from their investors, and it's a really bad look. So slowly we're getting there, but I don't think it's quick enough. And I think that awareness needs to spread a lot faster to prevent these problems from coming up.
Understood. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm from this side of the Atlantic, I guess, and there's a lot of help by European Union, non-dilutive funding through governments, some of which does cover the security aspect of medical device companies and any companies dealing with health data. Is there something similar in the US which would be able to help these companies?
Yeah, we have similar regulations in the US, but regulations in Europe are always a little bit more mature and they can evolve a lot faster than in America. I think some of the whole free market mentality of America can be a little bit dangerous as far as how fast innovation can go without any checks and balances in place. And we see it with AI. It runs rampant in America. You can do anything. You can use it however you want. There are no checks and balances in place that are effectively enforced, where those are enforced in Europe when it's going to be a very sensitive nature, something that is infrastructure sensitive or potentially health sensitive. So we have, in Europe, you have GDPR for data privacy. In the US, we have HIPAA protection for health information. And then, of course, you have the MDR, IVDR, any of these regulatory bodies that are controlling a medical device submission, where we have the FDA. But there are a lot of distinctions between the two, such as with legacy devices, so devices cleared before the latest cybersecurity guidance. The FDA doesn't really know how to wrangle these together and try to round them up and find a good solution, where Europe is effectively saying you need to retrofit it onto the MDR guidelines before you could have it on the MDD, but now you need to update your technical file. So it's forcing these manufacturers to stay up to date with everything. And we don't really have that going on in the US, so it's a little bit of a more difficult problem.
Understood. I was going to ask you this question before, because I'm generally curious about how the implications of AI in cybersecurity, in all fairness. Has it made things any better, any easier, any difficult, any more difficult? What's your take on that?
AI, in general, cybersecurity has made things so much better and made things so much worse. It helps everyone. So it helps the good guys, it helps the bad guys, it introduces new risks that we didn't know we had before, and it solves problems that we did have before. And so it's a very mixed bag. I would say that the benefits provided outweigh the risk of AI. Not from a security perspective. I would actually argue the opposite, that the security risk for AI is pretty significant as opposed to a security benefit through AI. But what we do see is the increased functionality, and ultimately, cybersecurity needs to strike that balance with usability and functionality. The only way to have perfect cybersecurity is to take your device, put it in a box, and go bury it in the desert where no one can find it. And then you're not going to get much use out of your device. So we want to see a very functional, very easy to use product, and AI helps with that to a massive degree. Cybersecurity has to be effectively the necessary evil trying to rein in the device or rein in the AI. And so I do think, though, that having AI-enabled medical devices does introduce a lot of new risk that we haven't seen before. But I do think it is ultimately worth the risk, and there are ways to work around it. There are ways to ensure that you're cleaning your data properly. You aren't introducing unsafe models into a product that could potentially harm someone or hallucinate bad results. And so I do think it's worth it if done properly.
I think it's interesting. Both of you mentioned cybersecurity is evolving slowly in the industry. I was at a conference not too long ago, and I probably listened to 20 innovator pitches to investors, and not a single innovator had cybersecurity on their roadmap. They had things like intellectual property protection, biocompatibility studies, but not a single one had cybersecurity. And as Dylan mentioned, the investors, a lot of them have been burned because the MedTech innovator didn't consider cybersecurity at the end, and it delayed the submission by months. It costs millions of dollars in overruns and lost time. So in my opinion, maybe it's slowly, but I'm not really seeing much progress at least from the pitches I saw. Maybe I watched the wrong 20 pitches, but not a single one mentioned cybersecurity.
It was the 21st one that mentioned it.
It wasn't a big enough statistical sample, I guess, yes.
No, I'm pretty sure. I mean, that's what's happened. Because I've been working in this business world for the past 4 to 5 years. Came across hundreds of pitch decks, and none actually. I mean, the majority, the very, very good majority, have never really delved deep into the cybersecurity aspect of what they're doing.
Yeah, and if we're building a surgical robot with AI or AI in vitro diagnostic system, and it's connected to the cloud, and it's, all these things have connectivity, I would think cybersecurity would be considered, because there's been incidents, and we mentioned earlier, people try to kind of cover up the incidents. There's been incidents where surgical robots have been compromised and cause issues during a surgery. There's been incidents where drug infusion pumps have been compromised, but the general narrative is nobody has been harmed by hacking a medical device still. And I don't understand why that's still the narrative. I don't think that to be true, actually.
I think we need a Netflix production of something going wrong, and it's just this film or series catches fire, and people will start to realize that if this actually happened, if there's a hospital who's been cyber hacked and things went wrong, they could actually really be in trouble. Because that's actually when things start to change, I guess.
Yeah, and even with the ransomware attacks, if the systems are offline and a patient arrives in an ambulance that has a heart attack and they're delayed intake into the hospital, that patient could die. But still, people don't attribute the cyber attack to patient, harm or death, which is interesting to me. And I guess maybe it's so we're not spreading fear about hospitals or medical devices. I'm not really sure why the narrative is to kind of like downplay all of this.
There's a study by UCSD, University of San Diego, and they were studying the effects of ransomware against hospitals, and they saw that if a hospital gets ransomwared, in the entire city, incidence of cardiac arrest goes up by a pretty significant number, by about 20%, and the survival rates drop pretty heavily. So they're having to...
What do you mean the incidence go up?
The quantity of cardiac arrest. They aren't able to stop and prevent it in that hospital. If there's a problem, there's a problem.
Oh, I thought you were saying because people find out about the ransomware and they start having a heart attack.
No, if there's anyone that's in a sensitive situation, anything, if they're having any cardiac problems, then they can go into cardiac arrest since they can't get any treatment. So the rates of that go up pretty significantly, and then the survival rates go down pretty massively since they have to reroute all care to nearby hospitals, which hospitals are very busy. It's not always easy to just say, here, take 600 more patients. Please figure it out. So yeah, the narrative definitely needs to change a fair amount. It's a pretty major problem. There are a lot of really nasty things happening in the cybersecurity space. I was just earlier talking about that problem with the blood center in the UK, where they're now able to directly attribute death to ransomware, which is a pretty scary thought.
What about patient harm or even death to medical devices? Has there been any documented cases that either one of you are aware of? Because I have read a few, but when I ask other people, they say that's not really true.
Like someone directly targeting a medical device to hurt someone?
Yeah, or a medical device being compromised because it's on the hospital network, and we consider hospital networks like hostile networks. They're already compromised.
I think the main risks that I've always seen and heard about are through non-targeted attacks, prolific viruses and prolific ransomware, which is the most realistic use case. Attackers are usually looking for the weakest target that they can find so that they can get the fastest and the most amount of money. Hospitals, especially in America, have a lot of money, and they're often extremely insecure, so they're super easy targets. So if you're able to target a medical device, which that would be something that leans more, it's still against the ransomware side. You're not targeting it directly to cause harm to a specific individual used by that's using that medical device. You're targeting the medical device to try to jump into the network and take over everything.
As part of your business development, have you ever tried to pick on a company or an entity, try to figure out the loopholes within their whole security system, and possibly even nearly getting hold or getting access to them, and then going to them, telling them, look, listen, we've nearly done that. Imagine if someone actually really wanted to do that. Have you ever done that?
Unfortunately, we would be in prison immediately if we did that.
Isn't there a law that if you, I had read it somewhere, I think it happened even locally here, that if you hack a company but then go to them to actually show them what you've done, you could actually given some kind of bounty reward or something.
Before you do that, they have to make a public announcement. They have to have public information available saying that we're accepting of people trying to do this. In Russia, it's legal to do that, which is where ransomware typically comes from, because ransomware is effectively legal in Russia. They call it post-paid cybersecurity. But in the US, you either need to be under contract and have testing authorization from the company going directly to you, or they provide open authorization to anyone acting in good faith. So doing it out of the goodness of trying to find vulnerabilities. But yeah, there are a lot of companies that do that. Hospitals typically don't, since there's so much sensitive information, but like tech companies will commonly do it. Streaming services, infrastructure services, they will do that. So you can go on Tesla's website and try to hack into them. And if you can successfully, then you reach out to Tesla, you say, hey, look what I did. Imagine if I was a bad guy, and then they'll give you money.
Well, we test hospitals when they, like you said, contract us to test them with a penetration test, and we've have 100% success rate of every hospital I've ever tested or we've ever tested we've gotten into, and pretty much owned everything.
It's almost too easy. I think our last hospital test that I was sitting in on took us like 35 minutes to take over everything in the network.
I mean, these are good case studies, I guess, for you to convince more people to invest into more cybersecurity solutions.
I think when people hear the word cybersecurity, they just sort of like tune out. And like they don't want to hear it. They just like turn the other direction and kind of run away. And I'm not sure why that is. I guess because most professionals in cybersecurity try to overly complicate it and talk geek talk with all these acronyms, and most people just sort of tune out. And part of our mission is to make it tangible and relatable as well. So why do you think it is that people like tune out when you say cybersecurity? Like when you say like, biocompatibility study, people are like, okay, that they understand that. But as soon as you mention cybersecurity, like people's like eyes glass over, like they don't want to hear anymore.
I mean, like speaking from a startup mentality. So if you're a startup and you're in this step and you need to get on to the next step, be it your next round, be it your next MVP, cybersecurity and investment in cybersecurity doesn't relate directly into you getting from this step to the next step. You're only gonna need. It's like when you're on vacation and you're on a tight budget. Do I pay for travel insurance or not? Most of the people, if they're running on a budget, all right, let's risk it. Let's not pay for travel insurance. Then if my luggage gets stolen or I'm doing this, I'm like, shoot, I should have paid for travel insurance. And I think, unfortunately, cybersecurity is often related to similar circumstances, which shouldn't be the case, especially when you're dealing with healthcare data, and that kind of, even from an investor perspective, when I'm speaking to a startup. And I'm realizing that they're not investing into health data, and amongst their main ambitions and main vision is to improve healthcare and to improve this and that. I mean, I'm gonna start questioning: are you really doing this for what you're saying? Because if you're actually looking to do that, you would have first and foremost made sure that the patient's data you're dealing with is going to be protected.
What do you think, Trevor? Why do people tune out when we talk about cybersecurity? You agree with Dylan? It's like related to insurance, and maybe we can get by without doing it altogether?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of a few things. That's definitely the biggest part. I always call it the necessary evil. Nobody wants it. It doesn't add tangible value. It's the same as insurance. You think insurance is expensive, but then as soon as you get in a car accident, you're going to be really happy that you had car insurance. But with cybersecurity, the technical side of things, it's dry, it's complicated, it slows everything down. Building a product is supposed to be, a lot of people have a poor mindset about it, in my opinion, that I think is the fault of San Francisco and no other location. They say move fast and break things, which is try to build a product. If it doesn't work, try to reiterate it and go through the cyclical process. And you can't do that in a regulated industry. You need to do things slow and methodically. But a lot of innovators try to go in with this startup mindset, which is very difficult in medtech, try to move really quickly and forget about the important steps like cybersecurity, like getting regulatory approval, going through all of these different types of testing and studies. And And then frankly, it's just nerdy and nobody wants to listen to it. I feel the same way sometimes when I hear talk about really difficult development terms for like embedded processors. And I understand development very well. It's a very large part of what I do in the day to day. But even still, sometimes I go, ooh, this is a lot. This is a lot to listen to.
Is that why you're moving to San Francisco to help solve the problems, since San Francisco is the source of the problems?
I'm going to go sit down on the street corners with a sign and, bang the drums about this all day. Slow down, everybody.
Or have you decided to move to Monaco instead?
Well, unfortunately, I can't work until 3 a.m. every day. So
if we're able to maybe use these couple of minutes, which we've been discussing, even for the sake of who's listening to us from a MedTech and HealthTech perspective, is to get everyone to realize that the sooner that they realize that they need to invest and think about cybersecurity, the documentations from day zero, it's actually going to be much easier for them when they're faced with FDA, with applications, with regulations. And I think that should be the key takeaway of all of this. And I mean, you're the best ones to obviously advocate for this, I would assume.
Yeah, 100%. We're coming up on time here a little bit. So where, Dylan, like, what is your vision for MedTech World? I know since we did the Dubai event, I think in February, that may have been our first event. You've now got one in California. You had one in Texas, Houston, I believe. So you're expanding quite a bit, and you have the flagship event in Malta. Like, what is the vision ultimately that you have for MedTech World and expanding?
From an event organizer perspective, we're obviously looking to replicate our flagship, our MedTech Malta flagship, across different continents, across different quarters of the year. So this from an event organizer perspective, which is obviously very superficial, but this has always been our goal to get as much coverage across the globe, to be able to then leverage the different ecosystems, the different connections, the different networks across these countries, from both a startup and an investor perspective, as well as a service provider. But from someone who's been in healthcare, I would say nearly all my life, through medical school, surgery, and the rest, I would genuinely want to use MedTech World and all the events and opportunities for us to connect as many startups with as many investors as possible to encourage the investors to deploy capital in these startups, so then eventually can help them go to market and get deployed either in hospitals, directly to patients, and in our healthcare ecosystems. And even more importantly, to be able to use our opportunities, discussions on stage, to help startups have an easier way, an easier route onto the next step, be it like this discussion we're having now. I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to convince someone who's listening to the podcast about the needs for them to start investing into cybersecurity way before they actually need to. And amongst this, I mean, that's where our passion and ambition lies with MedTech World. I do want to think of ourselves way more than just purely an event organizer or a media company, but essentially someone who's looking to bring the ecosystem together and leverage the connections we're building across different countries and cultures. Asia, we've mentioned Asia, we've mentioned Middle East, Europe, and North America. When different cultures, different industries come together, there's a lot to learn from each other. Challenges that startups in Asia or in the Middle East are facing now might have been the challenges that the industry in Europe or the America was facing 5-10 years ago, or vice versa. So that's where our passion generally lies.
Awesome. I think it's a great mission to help these innovators get these products to market and find the investors, and then also navigate the different global markets as well. I know from a cybersecurity perspective, we mainly focus on the FDA, but we've done pretty much every regulatory authority, and they're all a little bit different. I believe, Trevor, you think China is the most stringent, and then FDA is next. Is that still your assessment?
Yeah, I would say for cybersecurity controls, they're probably equivalent, maybe a little bit more on the FDA side, but it's so foreign what they do in China compared to anywhere else. It can be really hard for a lot of innovators to get their head around it, since most countries try to standardize around a couple of ISO standards or IC standards. And then the NMPA in China is very far out there, and they have to follow Chinese data privacy laws. They essentially write all their own standards from the ground up. And so Of course, there's still some overlap, but it's very different from what you might be used to if you've handled a submission in Japan or even Korea, which is another place with unique standards, but still it's closer to general global standards.
From Blue Goat and service providers working on a cybersecurity point of view, what's one thing you would change or would improve in the industry to help smoothen business out and the industry in general, if that makes sense?
I think getting your foundation down first, instead of trying to cram everything in at the last minute. What we see a lot of people doing is coming to us saying, we need to get our risk management framework in place after we've developed our device. We need to understand our development practices after we've developed our device. Start with the procedures you need in place. Start with your SOPs. Start with the different standards that you want to adhere to. Start with your QMS, and then build your device. Build it safely. Build it securely. And it does two things. First off, your time to market's going to get reduced since you don't have to go and try to retrofit all this at the end. But then when an auditor comes in or a tester like us, and we're trying to look for all the problems in your device, you should have already covered it. You should have thought about these things ahead of time and built controls in so that you have a secure device from the very beginning.
Yeah, and I think we have, Dylan, pretty common missions here. Like at Blue Goat, we're trying to raise the awareness about cybersecurity so these innovators can get their device to market versus waiting to the last minute and having all this extra cost, which frustrates the investors and frustrates the innovator and delays the time to market. And sometimes people don't even have the budget and they just abandon the project. We've seen that happen as well. So we're trying our best to raise the awareness and get people to consider it sooner than later, which actually ends up costing them a lot less and makes the whole process much smoother. And from talking to a lot of investors, it seems about 9 out of 10 MedTech startups fail. So we want to help improve those odds as well if we can.
Yep, and I mean, I think you're doing quite a good job, even in terms of how you've supported the industry in general this year. I think the MedTech industry has a lot to thank you for, especially when it comes to the events you've been doing. You've been touring around. It costs money, time, resources. And hopefully the MedTech companies will get to also appreciate that and do business with you, essentially.
Yeah, we hope so. All right, we're coming up on time, so I always ask for any last words of wisdom. I'll start with you, Trevor. I know what you always say, but let's see if you say something different this time.
I think know your market before you start. So this will go back to, you're mentioning all the differences between the different regulations, and it got me thinking, if you want to go into this and then when it comes time for submission, you go, oh, well, what if we submit into Japan as well? That could be cool. It's a very different process. Understand what your addressable market could be and where that is, and then have a game plan at the start instead of trying to say, oh, well, maybe we can do this at the very end. Because if that's your approach, the answer is no, you probably can't do it at the very end.
What about you, Dylan? Any last minute words of wisdom here?
I think from a business owner perspective, on a balance sheet, on a profit and loss, there are some expenses which are generally expenses, and then there are some costings which are investments. And cybersecurity is just that. It's an investment into the whole life cycle of what you're planning and all the blood, sweat, and tears that you're putting into the work that you're putting.
Awesome. And I'll say what Trevor always say is to consider cybersecurity early and often. Cool.
We should get shirts made.
We should get shirts made. We have a lot of ideas for shirts. Yes. Are you going to be at the Bay Area event, Dylan?
Yep. I'm flying to the US in 2 weeks' time, and I'm going to be spending some time there touring some cities. So it should be a good couple of weeks.
All right. Well, I'll be seeing you there. I'm not sure if Trevor's going to be there. I think he's going to be still in Asia at that point, but
we'll see you there. I think that was the last time I saw you, Dylan, was in San Francisco.
San Francisco, yep.
Yeah, during JP Morgan.
Yep.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Well, thanks so much, Dylan, for being a guest on our podcast. We really appreciate you taking the time today. And thanks so much for all of our listeners for tuning in, and we hope to see you on the next one.